Imagine waking up one day to find that the mirror still reflects you perfectly, but your face looks like a costume you've been wearing for years. Your mouth forms the same familiar lines, your eyes practice the same well-trained empathy, yet somewhere underneath the surface, behind the polite eyebrows and the agreeable jaw, something is restless, pacing, knocking at the glass. The day before you is already scripted, responses you'll deploy, smiles you'll rent, silences you'll maintain, all neatly indexed in a catalog of acceptable selves. You will be praised for how effortlessly you carry it. You will be asked to do it again tomorrow. But then a question shoulders its way into your morning. Clumsy, unavoidable, almost rude. What if this identity you're so careful to present isn't a self at all, but a set of well-cured habits? What if you has been a professional understudy for a role you never auditioned for? What if the costume clings, not because it's you, but because you've sweat into it long enough to mistake the smell for your own skin? A curious paradox hangs in the air. Everyone says, be yourself, and then punishes you when you do. We worship the iconoclasts after they're gone and ghost the ones within reach. We preach authenticity, but sell it as a brand. We applaud candor, but blacklist its consequences. If being yourself is the most natural thing in the world, why does it feel like standing up in a room where everyone else is comfortably seated? If authenticity is an effortless state, why does it require so much courage? How can something that belongs to you also be the most dangerous thing you can reveal? Imagine you carry a library of borrowed gestures. At work, you speak in crisp sentences like glass. With your friends, you cushion every truth with a joke, as if the truth might bruise them if you hand it over directly. With your family, you shrink just enough to fit inside their expectations, ankles folded, elbows tucked, so you won't knock over their cherished myths. You've learned the dance of social oxygen, the moves that keep you breathable. You can do this without thinking. You do it so well it looks like freedom. Then the tiny betrayal, the laugh you give that isn't yours, the apology you don't believe, the yes you say while your body screams no. These are practical. They buy you safety. They rent you belonging. That's what people say, isn't it? That you can be yourself in private. As if intimacy were a back room where your actual life waits patiently while your public life earns its keep. As if dignity must be negotiated behind the scenes. But here is the uncomfortable arithmetic. Your days are the only currency you have, and you are spending them on a version of yourself that leaves interest on the table. What if the most radical act available to you is deceptively simple? No manifesto, no crowd, no flag, just the refusal to abandon your own voice in the small moments where it would be easy to do so. What if the revolution begins with the decision not to rehearse the counterfeit smile? What would it cost? Money, friends, the story others tell about you? The story you've been telling about yourself? What if you stopped performing? Who would come to the show? Who would leave? Who would beg you to go back to the way you were? Soft-edged, agreeable, edible. Who would fear the clarity of your no? And deeper, if the performance has been your shelter, what happens when you walk out from under it and let it rain? Who are you when no one is scoring your sentences? Who are you when the algorithm in your head, coded by reward, punishment, approval, goes dark? Listen for a moment. There is a hum under the surface of your life, the electric tension between the person others enjoy and the person who keeps interrupting your dreams. You've tried to negotiate. You've said, I'll be real later when it's safer. You've tried to bargain like truth is a lease and you're waiting for a better market. But time does not accept layaway. It takes payment in full. And here's the sacrilege, the thought you're not supposed to think, maybe normality is not a sanctuary, but a soft-spoken tyrant. Maybe the script you inherited is less a map than a muzzle. Maybe the rules you've internalized were never written with your life in mind. If that's true, then being yourself is not a self-help slogan. It's contraband. It's insurrection. It is picking the lock from the inside. What if, for once, you said the thing you believe without pre-editing it for mass appeal? What if you pursued the work that drags meaning out of you like truth from a well, even if no one claps? What if you disappoint the people who only love you when you're convenient? What if you discover that the fear of exile is a mirage erected by your own nervous system to keep you compliant? How much of your life has been built around not making other people uncomfortable? How much has that cost you? It's a cruel joke that the world asks, "Who are you?" and then hands you a pre-printed form. You sign, you smile, you pose, you perform, and then at night, when everyone else's voices dim, your own arrives like a stranger. It knocks. "Let me in." If you keep pretending you don't hear it, how long before it stops knocking? The great question then isn't, what do others want from you? But what is the truth of you? And are you willing to bear its consequences? If being yourself is the revolutionary act, what are you rebelling against? A culture, a family story, or the police you carry inside your head? Before we can begin the rebellion, we have to identify the regime. The uniforms might not be visible, but the rules are. They live in the muscle memory of your apologies, in the angles your body learns to make, in the grammar of your silence. If we are to be honest, and honesty is the only currency worth anything here, then we must step into the basement where the hidden machinery hums and watch who it serves. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. So you take the stairs. The door to the basement sticks, as if it knows what you're about to do. You lean your weight into it, and it gives. The air tastes older down here. The machinery hums, steady, obedient, invisible. Gears labeled approval, avoidance, certainty, hope of belonging, turn in patient circles. You think, this isn't a conspiracy outside me, it's an ecosystem inside me. And like any ecosystem, it protects the conditions that keep it alive. You weren't born with a mask. You grew one, slowly, carefully, with the materials available, a parent's sigh, a teacher's raised eyebrow, a partner's quiet withdrawal, the glittering scoreboard of likes, the warm applause for being easy. Each was a lesson in oxygen economics. Behave and breathe, rebel and choke. Your nervous system learned the exchange rate long before you had words for it. You did not choose this. You adapted. It starts early. The body keeps a ledger. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which registers the ache of exclusion, lights up like a burn when you're cut from the group. Social pain and physical pain share circuitry. The brain does not bother to distinguish sharply between a bruise on your arm and the hollow when you aren't invited. Oxytocin rewards us for syncing with the tribe. The amygdala screens for threat. And deviation is threat because it risks exile. The autonomic wisdom is simple. Belong or perish. No wonder you became fluent in the grammar of nodding. But what the body safeguards, the psyche justifies. The mind writes a story that keeps the alarm bells from sounding. Leon Festinger named one such story cognitive dissonance. When your behavior diverges from your values, you resolve the tension by editing either the values or the memory. I didn't want to say that, you think, but it wasn't the right time. Time becomes a padded room. Irving Goffman called life a performance, complete with front stage and backstage selves. You learn to wield a script. It works so well, you begin to confuse stage directions with conscience. Carl Jung would point to the persona, the mask you craft to meet the world's demands, and to the shadow, the living archive of everything the persona censors. You keep the shadow in the basement because the culture trained you to see it as savage. Your rage, your hunger, your inconvenient clarity. But what doesn't vanish condenses. Repressed, it seeps through the seams. Sarcasm as diplomacy, exhaustion as kindness, ambition as helpfulness. The more your persona is rewarded, the more you incarcerate the shadow, the more you feel the low-grade fever of inauthenticity. Jung warned that what you refuse to be conscious of will present itself as your fate. You call it bad luck. He called it the unlived life. Friedrich Nietzsche diagnosed the herd, a morality designed by the timid to keep the wild in check, to keep the village quiet. It sanctified meekness and suspicion of difference. He didn't hate compassion, he hated its counterfeit, the version that resents vitality and calls it arrogance. Become who you are, he pleaded, knowing most would rather become who they are allowed to be. It is safer to inherit a self than to invent one. But that safety exacts a tax, your power, your candor, your strangeness. Arthur Schopenhauer looked beneath even that. into the dim engine he called the will, the blind striving that animates all things. The will doesn't care for your happiness. It wants continuation, momentum, repetition. To the will, conformity is efficient. Suffering, he said, is the cost of wanting in a world that seldom yields. Your habit of settling then, of bargaining away your edges, was a way to suffer less. But is a quiet ache better than a bright wound? The will would vote yes. Your soul might not. Jean-Paul Sartre entered, cigarette and all, to diagnose bad faith, the self-deception by which you deny your freedom to escape responsibility. I am a good employee, you say, as if the sentence were a law of physics. You reduce yourself to a role so you can claim your choices are inevitable. Sartre's waiter isn't just pouring coffee, he's pouring justification. You do likewise, carefully, sweetly, because freedom is terrifying. Freedom means you could say no. Freedom means you could disappoint. Freedom means the consequences would have your name on them. Viktor Frankl, who watched meaning burn and yet salvaged it from ash, saw that purpose does not arrive as a product. It is found in responsibility to a task, a person, a suffering you choose to bear rather than escape. He who has a why can bear almost any how, Nietzsche wrote, and Frankl proved it in Hell. In the absence of a chosen why, the default will be borrowed whats, status, acceptance, approvals, as breath. We become oxygen addicts in rooms with no windows. Aldous Huxley warned of softer tyrannies. When truth is buried under comfort, people stop noticing they're kneeling. If Orwell feared boot on face, Huxley feared soma in veins. Ours is a culture that narcotizes dissent not with chains, but with prizes, relevance, convenience, endless small entertainments. The apparatus need not punish you for being yourself if it can entice you to prefer a painless imitation. The algorithm is your soma, bespoke and frictionless. Why risk being exiled from the digital commons when you can get a dopamine stipend for compliance? None of this arises in a vacuum. Evolution whispers, safety in numbers. Families enforce it. Love you as long as you don't rearrange the furniture of our story. Schools rehearse it, reward neatness over curiosity. Workplaces calibrate it. Professionalism is often a velvet word for predictability. Markets capitalize it. Identity becomes a brand, authenticity a commodity, soul a subscription tier. The political weather intensifies it. Outrage unites tribes, and tribes punish nuance as treason. The machinery hums along because it fits every floor of the house. Your mind, brilliant as it is at rationalizing, recruits biases to keep the peace. Loss aversion whispers that the pain of rejection will dwarf the gains of self-respect. The spotlight effect convinces you that everyone is watching your deviations when most are dizzy with their own. Pluralistic ignorance ensures you assume the room believes what it pretends to believe. You conform to a consensus that isn't even there. Confirmation bias prunes any evidence that you could survive refusal. Habits crystallize into identity. You mistake routines for principles. And then there's trauma, old or subtle, that taught your body what smiling buys. We speak of fight, flight, freeze, but there is also fawn, the adaptive art of appeasing to prevent danger. You could not afford to be yourself back then. Being yourself invited harm. Your nervous system kept you alive with brilliance. The tragedy is when an emergency strategy becomes a permanent address. Without noticing, you become the person who apologizes for existing. Your authentic impulses don't feel like options. They feel like threats. Notice the paradox. What begins as protection becomes prison. The persona that wins you entry stamps your passport with exile from the country of your own voice. The herd that kept you safe keeps you small. Bad faith rescues you from anxiety by denying you the only kind of dignity worth wanting, the kind paid for with risk. The soma of our age buys happiness on installment and bills meaning at the end. There is a reason you have not simply chosen to be yourself. You are not weak. You are well trained. You are neurologically set to seek safety, socially conditioned to equate approval with oxygen, philosophically coached to outsource freedom to roles and systems. Every time you flirt with rebellion, the machinery states its case. You will lose love. You will lose livelihood. You will be alone. The body shudders. The persona tightens. The shadow sighs. If the roots are this deep, then the stakes are not cosmetic. We are not talking about switching hobbies, but about repossessing the deed to your life. To do that, you will have to challenge something ancient in you and persistent around you. You will have to watch yourself. Disobey the reflex to self-censor when your own pulse is on the line. You will have to risk the shame the herd uses like a leash. You will have to stomach the nausea that arrives when you tell the truth and the room goes quiet. The question is not whether it will be hard. The question is whether the alternative is survivable. Keep listening to the hum. It has a lullaby it sings. Be nice, be normal, be needed, be quiet. It promises warmth. It promises tenure, but it does not promise a life. And there are consequences, some subtle, some catastrophic, when you let the machinery write your autobiography. The unseen consequences. You flip the switch. The upstairs fills with ordinary light, and the ordinary is the most treacherous thing you'll see all day. No alarms, no cuffs, just objects in their places, routines in their grooves, the kind of order that looks like safety until you notice what it costs. Start in the kitchen. You're answering a message with a careful half-truth because you'd rather be polite than precise. You think, harmless. But half-truths compound. Your life becomes a portfolio of little hedges, small edits, tiny conciliations that never feel catastrophic, only practical. Then months pass, and you realize you've drifted 5 degrees off your own north. 5 degrees across an ocean is a new continent. At work, you don't ask for the project you want because the last person who did was called difficult, and you can't afford that adjective. You overfunction, polish other people's sentences, swallow the criticism that would improve the work because it would disrupt the ease. The team loves you for being reliable, which is to say, for not making them confront their own complacency. Your calendar is full, your soul is shelved. Promotions are bestowed on those most fluent in the office dialect of pleasant restraint. You tell yourself you're waiting. For what? A culture to change without anyone risking the discomfort that would change it? In love, you rehearse "I'm fine" until the line ossifies into identity. You downplay needs because your nervous system confuses desire with danger. The relationship becomes an exquisite performance of compatibility. Two people negotiating a ceasefire instead of sharing a country. Conflict isn't the villain, pretense is. But pretense keeps the peace, so you deploy it as if it were kindness. Quietly, the intimacy starves. And then one day, one of you says, "I don't recognize us." And it's true. You've built a home measured to the dimensions of your fear. Now listen to the body, always the most honest witness. You notice fatigue with no clear cause, sleep punctuated by 3 a.m. conferences with your doubts, a restlessness the coffee can't outpace. The HPA axis hums harder when you're persistently performing. Cortisol becomes a weather system you start to call personality. The ventral vagal safety that lets you rest and digest is rare. You hover in sympathetic vigilance, scanning the room for cues. Am I okay? Am I acceptable? Your face is a diplomat, your organs pay the tariff. Meanwhile, the mind is a lawyer working billable hours. Status quo bias persuades you that sticking with the familiar pain is wiser than risking the unknown's relief. Loss aversion whispers that the cost of rejection will dwarf any gain in integrity. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you in jobs, loves, habits that no longer fit because you've invested so much in the story of them. The spotlight effect convinces you that everyone will notice your deviation, when most are lost in their own private auditions. Pluralistic ignorance ensures that the group enforces norms almost no one personally values. Each person censors themselves because they wrongly assume others believe the script. System justification tells you that the existing order must be reasonable, because existing orders must be. You confuse inertia with wisdom. Your brain's default mode network stitches these rationalizations into a coherent narrative. This is who I am. Predictive coding refines it. The brain prefers expectation to surprise. Even your dopamine learns the pattern. Approval becomes the cue, compliance the action, relief the reward. Break the loop and you don't just risk disapproval. You trigger a withdrawal. No wonder rebellion feels like hunger. Culture abets this with a smile. Algorithms are tuned to keep you comfortable, and comfort prefers consistency over truth. Your feeds serve you a personality buffet that looks like choice, but is mostly curation. Authenticity is repackaged as content, something you publish, not something you live. Professionalism codes itself as apolitical, which is often a way to avoid moral courage while preserving brand safety. Schools reward answers over questions. Economies reward efficiency over aliveness. Every layer incentivizes the persona. Be legible, be predictable, be market-ready. Zoom out. The consequences metastasize. Teams don't innovate because the best ideas die of shyness before they can breathe. Safety violations go unreported because not rocking the boat is an unofficial promotion criterion. Whistleblowers are canonized in hindsight and fired in real time. Communities fracture into tribes because being yourself becomes synonymous with picking a side rather than telling the truth. Nuance becomes suspect, a luxury for the privileged or a trick of the enemy. The public square turns theatrical. Everyone speaks to their own balcony. We learn to perform outrage for applause and call it conviction. Art flattens into content marketing. The weird, which is the engine of originality, is sanded down because the marketplace prefers a familiar surprise. The same 10 faces rotate through the same 10 tones. We praise voice while distributing a template for it. Meanwhile, the unlived voices, yours among them, turn to sediment, a bed of silt in the river of your life, thickening the current until movement itself feels implausible. There are quieter casualties too. Friendship withers into exchange, favors traded, roles maintained, because vulnerability risks asymmetry, and asymmetry risks embarrassment. You keep telling the story of being busy, and busyness becomes a moat around the fortress of, I don't want to be seen and possibly refused. The self becomes a brand guide. You refer to yourself in the third person. I'm the kind of person who, as if identity were a contract to be honored rather than a living conversation to be held. And then there's the grief no one names, the sorrow of the unlived life. It leaks out as irritability, envy, the sourness you feel when someone else is brave. You scroll past their risks and draft indictments to keep your equilibrium. Easy for them, performative, naive. Sometimes you're right, often you're just hungry. That hunger is a compass you keep misreading as criticism. Consider what happens to truth in a culture of persona. It must travel in costume. Facts bend to fit the group's appetite. Leaders lie not always out of malice, but because our collective nervous system rewards soothing fictions over inconvenient verities. Then we wonder why institutions corrode. Trust is not a philosophy. It is a practice of reality telling even when it shivers. We get the public we tolerate in private. We get the policies that mirror our private evasions. We get the crises that thrive in rooms where honesty is impolite. By now, the hum is louder. You realize the machinery's outputs are everywhere, even in your language. You say should more than want, need more than mean. You preface truths with disclaimers as if you require a license to exist. You apologize reflexively, a ritual of appeasement that keeps you small. Your boundaries come with loopholes. You mistake exhaustion for virtue. You call it being a team player. You call it maturity. You call it love. But love that requires your disappearance is not love. It's a docile pact. Is this dramatic? Perhaps. But notice how the consequences stack, not as a spectacular collapse, but as a slow subtraction. A millimeter from your honesty here, a fraction of a tone from your voice there, and soon you have a life whose architecture you barely chose. You keep receipts of your compliance and call it stability. But stability without integrity is a stillness on the verge of rot. Here's the cruelest part. Your environment conspires to normalize it. People praise you for being easy. Your paycheck rewards silence. Your family thanks you for keeping the peace. The world will decorate your cage if you let it. And because humans are exquisitely adaptive, you develop a taste for the very air that keeps you lightheaded. Normalcy bias then pats you on the head. This is just how it is. It becomes easier to imagine an apocalypse than to imagine telling the truth in a Tuesday meeting. You are not alone. That's the problem and the permission. This is collective. Our species has learned to trade aliveness for assurance. We mistake harmony for health when it's often just fear choreographed. But collective problems are vulnerable to individual courage. A single honest sentence can alter a room's climate. One active boundary can reset a lineage. One refusal can puncture a ritual. That's not sentiment, that's physics. Feel the urgency. The longer you delay, the more your life creates secondary structures. Mortgages of meaning, debts of expectation that make rebellion more expensive. There is no perfect time. Waiting for consensus is a way to collude with your own erasure. And yet the danger is real. Authenticity has consequences. But so does its absence. If you do nothing, you risk the most ordinary tragedy, to die as a perfect stranger to the person you were meant to meet. What would it take to stop feeding the machine? What would it cost to disappoint the appropriate people? How do you become fluent in the dialect of your own yes and no? You don't dismantle a system this intimate with slogans. You learn new reflexes. You make a different kind of promise to yourself. You stage a rebellion in the smallest possible unit, a single, unedited act. The rebellion, how to break free. You don't topple an internal regime with slogans. You start with a body, a breath, and a sentence that doesn't lie. The revolution is local, cellular, the kind that no one claps for, at least not at first. It's less like a parade and more like a quiet refusal in a small room where you've always said yes. The room doesn't know what to do with you. Good. That means you're remaking gravity. Here's the first counterintuitive shift. Stop waiting to feel authentic before you act. Authenticity is not a mood that arrives to bless your courage. It's a byproduct of acting in alignment. Confidence doesn't precede the decision. It grows in the shadow of it. The nervous system learns by exposure. You make a small truth, you survive its consequences, and your body recalibrates. Courage, then, is not loud. It's a choreography. Feel the fear, keep your voice, tell the truth, stay. Begin with the smallest unit of rebellion, an accurate sentence. Not a speech, not an essay, just a precise string of words that does not betray you. I don't want to go. I'm not available for that deadline. I need to think before I commit. I disagree. That joke isn't funny to me. These are simple, which is why they're so difficult. They put a claim on the air that cannot be mistaken for accommodation. They are tiny declarations of sovereignty. Practice them where the stakes are low. Your nervous system needs reps. Make a ritual of micro-disobedience. Design it. Give it a name. Treat it like training, because that's exactly what it is. The 10-second gap. Between the request and your answer, insert 10 seconds of breath. Feel your feet. Ask, what do I know to be true right now? Say that, not the rehearsed script. The gap is a lever. The boundary sentence. Build a simple form you can swap into any context. I don't X, I do Y. As in, I don't work weekends. I do deliver early when the scope is clear. Or, I don't share this part of my life. I do enjoy talking about that. The ask. Choose one instance per week to ask for precisely what you want, not the diluted version that invites easy approval. Make it specific, time-bound, and without apology. Name the unsaid. In a meeting, in a friendship, at a dinner table, say the sentence everyone is orbiting. It seems like we're agreeing to keep things vague so no one has to make a hard decision. Do it kindly, without performance. Truth spoken calmly is an earthquake enough. A Soma Sabbath. One day a week without the algorithm. No feeds, no dopamine stipend for compliance. Replace with difficult pleasures. Long text, long walk, long talk. The nervous system remembers how to inhabit time without a drip. Shadow appointment, 30 minutes, twice a week. Write a letter from the parts of you keep sequestered, the envious one, the furious one, the artist, the one who wants too much. Then write back from your witnessing self. Ask, what job can I give you so you stop sabotaging me? Integrate, don't exile. The bravery budget. Set aside a literal amount of time and money for consequences. A cushion to survive a lost client, a pause to weather a cold week in a relationship. Courage is easier when you've planned for the tremors. Pair the behavioral with the bodily. Your physiology is the stage on which truth has to perform. Polyvagal theory teaches that when your system feels unsafe, your social engagement shuts down. So safety first, not as avoidance, but as a platform for risk. Orient. Let your eyes scan the room. Name 5 colors. Feel the support of the chair. Tell your body, here, now, not then. Breathe lower and slower. 4 seconds in, 6 out. Longer exhales whisper to your vagus nerve. Stand down. Microshake. Loosen your hands, jaw, and shoulders. Animals do it to discharge activation. You are an animal, however well-dressed. Slower speech. Aim for 85% of your usual pace. It signals to your system that you're not under threat, and it lets your words land. Friendly posture to yourself. Uncrossed arms, open palms, signals that your own truth is welcome to you. Cognitively, become a scientist of your evasions. Keep a log of the stories your mind deploys to keep you obedient. Label the biases when they appear. Ah, that's loss aversion telling me to keep a hollow peace. That's the spotlight effect insisting everyone will notice if I refuse. Ask 2 questions before you decide. Who benefits if I stay vague? And what is the smallest risk I can take that teaches my body the world doesn't end when I am honest? Jung's shadow cannot be negotiated into obedience by niceness. Give it work. Rage can protect a boundary. Envy can point to desire. Ambition can draft a plan. Every exiled energy becomes a saboteur. Every integrated energy becomes a tool. Nietzsche's challenge, become who you are, isn't a poetic dare. It's a practice of taking responsibility for the raw materials of your temperament and forging them into a form that serves your values. Sartre demands the same. Abandon bad faith. Replace I can't with I won't, which is scarier and cleaner. Now you can choose again. Build a small republic of the real. 2 or 3 people who consent to a pact. No performance, no pity, no weaponized advice, just clarity, presence, and reciprocity. Meet regularly. Ask each other, where did you lie to yourself this week? And what truth are you avoiding because it would change something? Co-regulate when you speak the hard thing. Breathe together, sit in silence, let the shame metabolize. Collective courage is a multiplier. Pluralistic ignorance dissolves when one person names the weather. At work, experiment with sanctioned subversion. Carve a 10% renegade project into your week. A task aligned with your sense of meaning that also serves the mission. Present it cleanly, measure outcomes. You're not begging permission, you're creating value on your own terms. Write 1 difficult email a week that states reality without cushioning it into fiction. Here is the risk, here is the cost, here is my recommendation. Ask for the responsibility you secretly want and the resources to do it well. If difficult attaches to your name, let it mean clear. In art and intimacy, practice embarrassment as a compass. Make something you're afraid will reveal you. Share it with 1 person. Repeat. In conversation with a partner, tell the truth a day earlier than you usually would. Schedule a weekly, no-perform hour. No pleasing, no fixing, no optimization. Just presence and the question, what is alive in you? If the relationship can't metabolize that, then you know where the limit is. History confirms that small refusals can rewire the public. Rosa Parks' no was not spontaneous. It was a practiced stance embedded in a community. James Baldwin wrote not to flatter a side, but to be an honest man. The pages burned because they were alive. Frida Kahlo painted the self that pain tried to edit out. Her idiosyncrasy became an atlas for others. You are not them, and you do not need to be. But the principle scales. A single truthful act refactors the room, sometimes the world. Expect fallout. Some will be relieved by your clarity and draw nearer. Others will miss the compliant version of you and call the change betrayal. Disappoint the appropriate people. Appropriate means those who love you only when you are useful, those invested in your silence, those who confuse your boundary with an attack. Clarity is kind, compliance is easy. They are not the same. This is not a call to recklessness. Context matters. If you are navigating structures that punish dissent more severely because of identity, status, or risk, your rebellion must be cunning. Build runway, document everything, find allies, use channels, escalate deliberately. Remember that camouflage can be a wisdom, not a lie, when survival is at stake. The goal is not martyrdom, it's agency. Picture this, you in a meeting where everyone is praising a plan that quietly endangers the team's integrity. Your heart accelerates. The old script is loaded. Nod, say something inoffensive, cache the praise. Instead, you breathe, anchor your feet and say, I think we are optimizing for optics over outcomes. And I don't support that. Here's what I propose. Silence, a shift. Maybe someone bristles, maybe someone exhales. Either way, the room has a new option in it. You put it there. Viktor Frankl warned that meaning is not found by pursuing it directly, but by answering what life asks of you. You are being asked to take responsibility for your own voice. You can bear almost any consequence if your why is clean. Write your why on a card you carry. I tell the truth to preserve my aliveness and serve what matters more than my comfort. Read it when the old alarms wail. Over time, something changes. The persona becomes a tool you wear consciously, not a skin you're trapped in. The shadow sits at your table because you gave it a chair. Your nervous system learns that disagreement is not death. Your voice develops edges, not to wound, but to hold shape. Rooms that once felt suffocating become negotiable. The world doesn't always applaud, but it is more honest with you because you taught it how. And beneath all this, a deeper realization is assembling itself, like a figure stepping out of fog. Perhaps being yourself is not about unveiling a fixed essence, but about consenting to a living process. Perhaps the self is not a noun, but a verb, not discovered, but made and remade through 1,000 accurate sentences, through chosen responsibilities, through the courage to become. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. You cross the threshold and discover there is no other room. This breath, this hour, this ordinary light was always the cathedral. The revolution you wanted to stage somewhere else, with banners and witnesses, is asking to happen here, in the unglamorous clarity of your next decision. It hits you with the force of something embarrassingly simple. There is no later. There is only the shape you give your life right now. The rest is myth. What you've been calling authenticity was never a buried statue waiting to be unearthed, polished, and displayed. It isn't a relic. It isn't a finished artifact that guarantees you applause or safety. The self you owe this world is not a noun, but a verb, a way of moving through days with less translation costs between what you know and what you say, between what you value and what you do. You don't discover yourself like a treasure. You forge yourself like a tool, daily, fallibly, in public, with the materials of your temperament and the heat of your choices. The lock you've been rattling wasn't on the door. It was in your hand, disguised as later, as when I'm ready, as when they understand me. You realize the jailer has your face, not as an enemy, but as a version of you that once kept you safe. You can thank them and step aside. The fear of exile that patrolled your edges was memory, not prophecy. It guarded a child's geography with adult authority. You aren't there anymore. The old paradox clarifies itself. Being yourself is not self-indulgence. It is fidelity. Fidelity to reality. Fidelity to your particular slice of it. The glint of truth you alone can steward. When you tell the truth, you are not demanding the world admire you. You are cooperating with the way things actually are. The world rearranges around reality with relief. Where you fudge, it fractures. Where you align, it breathes. This is not mystical, it's structural. Integrity reduces friction. Here's the pivot that reframes everything. Your life is not about managing other people's nervous systems. It is about stewarding your own in service of what matters. That doesn't license cruelty, it clarifies the target. Your responsibility is to become a reliable instrument. When people encounter you, they should hear a tuning fork for the real, sometimes sweet, sometimes dissonant, always honest. This is how trust is built. This is how cultures heal. This is how love becomes more than a performance. You begin to see that the police inside your head, the internalized approval matrix, doesn't enforce law. It enforces habit. And habit is not fate. Prediction errors, moments when you act differently than your old story predicted, are the brain's invitation to update the model. Each accurate sentence you speak is a small prediction error. Each boundary you keep is a revision to the architecture. Your body learns, disagreement is not death. Your circle learns, clarity is safe. The environment you inhabit refactors because you did. This realization carries with it a grief you must honor. To be yourself, you will lose things, certain approvals, the ease of being legible, the narcotic of being liked by most. But what you lose was never yours. It was rent paid to an arrangement you no longer consent to. In return, you gain something immeasurable, a congruence that lets you sleep deeply, love cleanly, work bravely. You gain the capacity to be moved by your own life, not as an audience member, but as the author who is surprised by the characters and keeps writing anyway. Another paradox emerges, and it is beautiful. Your distinctness is a gift to others, not a risk to the group. Herds stagnate when everyone learns the same choreography of safety. Communities become alive when difference is metabolized into meaning. Your courage licenses mine. My clarity steadies yours. The note only you can sing doesn't compete with the chorus, it completes it. We don't need more versions of a market-ready persona. We need the angles of you that no billboard can standardize. The world has a hole the exact shape of your courage. If you don't fill it, it becomes a vortex that sucks you into resentment. If you do, it becomes a current that carries others. Remember those thinkers who served as escorts through the basement. Young's shadow becomes not a threat but a workforce. You assign jobs to your outlaw energies. Nietzsche's "become who you are" is no longer a taunt but a manual. The self is a craft, not a costume. Sartre's bad faith dissolves when you admit "I won't" instead of hiding in "I can't." Frankl's meaning arrives not as sensation, but as responsibility you dare to accept. Huxley's warning about soft tyrannies loses power when you choose difficult pleasures over easy anesthesia. They were all pointing to the same exit. Consent to the weight of your freedom and watch how your syllables gain gravity. Let's name the ultimate truth outright. The revolutionary act of being yourself is an act of love. Not romance, not sentiment, but agape. The stubborn commitment to the good, starting with what is real. Love that colludes with illusions is merely attachment. Love that cooperates with reality becomes mercy. You are merciful to yourself when you stop asking your life to be bearable at the cost of being true. You are merciful to others when you stop requiring their approval for you to live with integrity. You relieve them of the job of authorizing you. You free them to meet a person and not a projection. From this vantage, everything that frightened you becomes intelligible. The consequences you feared were tuition. Discomfort was the apprenticeship of dignity. Silence was expensive. Speech, even when it cost you, was a down payment on a life you could inhabit. You don't need assurance of applause. You need a reliable covenant with yourself. I will not abandon me. That covenant is an altar you carry. You return to it when the room goes cold. You return to it when your hands shake. You return to it when you are tempted to trade truth for peace. The peace offered by pretense is counterfeit. The peace offered by alignment is earned. There is no finish line, only fluency. You don't become authentic once and for all. You practice being in tune. Some days you will miss the note. You will lie, hedge, shrink. When you notice, don't turn the knife inward. Repair. Tell the truth a day later. Apologize without theater. Recommit. The practice is cumulative. The ledger tilts toward honest living. Your life begins to sound like you. So what do you do now that you see it? You do something small and irreversible. Tonight you pour a glass of water like an offering and write one sentence that doesn't lie about your life. You read it aloud. You send the message you've postponed. You decline the invitation that drains you. You make the phone call that trembles. You walk into a room and don't make yourself smaller. You go to work and say the line that upgrades the air. You fail, you survive, you learn, you repeat. The revolution educates you as you conduct it. And when the old alarms scream, because they will, you put a hand on your sternum and remember, the door is not locked. The door was never locked. You were waiting for someone to open it for you. Here you are, key in hand, because you are the key. You turn it, not with rage, but with resolve. You step into the weather of your life without a forecast. You let it rain, you let it clear. You watch what grows. Behind you, the machinery hums more quietly. Above you, windows open. Around you, a few faces soften, a few harden. That's fine. Ahead of you, a road appears where there used to be a wall. And within you, a quiet that doesn't feel like hiding, but like home. This is the place rebellion was trying to lead you. A life where your words recognize your mouth, your work recognizes your hands, your love recognizes your heart. Imagine waking up one day, tomorrow perhaps, and the mirror doesn't feel like a costume. Your reflection looks back not as a verdict, but as a companion. You nod, not in performance, but impact. Then you go downstairs into the bright rooms where you work and love and decide, and you do the bravest, most ordinary thing. You choose the next accurate sentence. You live inside it. You let it change you. You let it change the room.